r/AskReddit, who is a person that everyone thought was crazy, but they ended up being right. Barry James Marshall was one of the scientists who discovered that the bacteria H. pylori causes stomach ulcers. However, getting people to believe it was difficult. It was thought that lifestyle and excessive stomach acid were the main factor that lead to ulcers, so when he suggested that a bacterial infection could cause it, no one believed him. In response, he infected himself with H. pylori by drinking cultures, which in turn gave himself stomach ulcers, and then treated the infection. He and Robin Warren received a Nobel Prize for this discovery. Link. My grandma. She insisted people kept stealing her newspaper, and specifically said it was someone in a white van. Grandma was always a little off, so we just thought she was paranoid and had a bad delivery person. Until one day my mom and I are driving past her house and a white van in front of us stopped, stole my grandma's newspaper, and drove off. Grandma wasn't crazy after all, at least not about that. What's the old phrase, just cause you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't following you. Jose Canseco was one of the first players to openly discuss how prevalent steroid use was in the 90s 2000s, and people dismissed his claims as being from a player on decline just trying to stay relevant. Also had the greatest AMA in Reddit history. Link. I was on a flight with him when he was flying back from DC after testifying in front of Congress. Growing up in the 80s, I just kept thinking Bash Brothers. Had no idea he was in front of Congress. Otherwise I'd have asked other than just banging elbows with him. Lindy Chamberlain Creighton. A dingo really did eat her baby. That poor woman. It was a joke my entire childhood. John Lydon of the Sex Pistols. Tried to warn the world about the crimes of Jimmy Savile in an interview in 1978, and was banned from appearing on the BBC for his trouble. Ignaz Semmelweis. In 1846, Semmelweis proposed the idea that hand-washing could prevent the spread of disease in hospitals. He was ridiculed during his time, sent to a mental asylum, and died forgotten by his peers. Courtney Love, similar with Harvey Weinstein. Topher Grace. Got a lot of flack on that 70s show, for being antisocial and cold towards his castmates. Turns out they were all massive assholes. I didn't know all of them were bad, I just thought one was really bad. Masterson's a convicted rapist now. Kinda wild he got away with it for so long, but I guess that makes sense when there are still 90,000 untested rape kits. Link. He a real one. Martha Mitchell, wife of John Mitchell, Nixon's attorney general. Martha kept saying that there was hanky-panky going on, but nobody listened to her. They made her seem like a hysterical, silly older woman. But she was right. Is she the one who was kidnapped and drugged by government officials? There is a series called Gaslit with Julia Roberts, who plays Martha Mitchell. This was a phenomenal show. They deliberately framed her as an unreliable narrator, in fact. Died of a staph infection, which might have been prevented with proper hand washing. The Martha Mitchell effect is a fascinating topic. Topher Grace was seen as just some holier-than-thou actor who didn't want to be friends with the rest of the cast. And now we know why. Courtney Love, granted she's still a bit nutty, but she was right on about Weinstein. If Harvey Weinstein invites you to a private party, don't go. The lady who got burned from McDonald's coffee. If I recall, she was so injured she lost 20% of her body weight while hospitalized. McDonald's was later discovered to be intentionally selling nuclear hot coffee because you couldn't drink it quickly, and thus ordered fewer refills. Didn't the coffee fuse her labia together? And all she was asking for was her medical bills to be covered? Philippa Langley, she believed Richard III was buried under a car park in Leicester. And was found to be correct, and he was. Link. Rose McGowan. She was talking crazy shit about people following her and ex-Mossad agents being involved. She was dismissed as insane. Turns out, Weinstein had an army of spies. He had following victims to keep them quiet, including the exact people she had described. I forgot her name, but a dingo did in fact eat her baby. Imagine being globally ridiculed after having your baby taken from you like that. People are cruel. Ludwig Boltzmann. His equations and formulas explain the physical properties of matter, but as it went against the then accepted laws of physics, he was ridiculed and ignored for years while fighting for atom theory to be accepted. He took his own life just 3 years before Ernest Rutherford discovered the nucleus of an atom, proving Boltzmann's theory. Lindy Chamberlain Creighton. Lindy Chamberlain is her name. I'm glad she was finally proven right. Lindy Chamberlain. This one is so tragic. Barry Marshall. Remember in the 80s, when everyone seemed to have ulcers, and they were basically treated with Tums? Marshall was a researcher who discovered that H. pylori bacteria caused ulcers, not just too much acid in the stomach. Unfortunately, no one would believe him. So he literally documented himself drinking the bacteria, getting ulcers, and successfully treating them with antibiotics. Gary Webb, the San Jose Mercury News reporter that uncovered the CIA link to crack cocaine into Los Angeles. The government used other newspapers to discredit him. A few years later, he was found in his home with 2 bullet holes in his head and the coroner ruled it a suicide. He was right. Writer Ernest Hemingway was convinced the FBI had him under surveillance. His friends and family told him he was nutters. Until some unsealed records a while back proved that he actually was being followed, had his phones bugged, etc. Galileo Galilei. King of night vision. King of insight. Shout out to John Brown, who actually was super crazy but also totally right. Didn't know that. If you were a physics or engineering major, that name is very familiar, Boltzmann constant. Glad that he eventually got recognized. Had I so interfered in behalf of the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, the so-called great, or in behalf of their friends and suffered and sacrificed what I have in this interference, every man in this court would have deemed it worthy of reward rather than punishment. John Brown, speaking on November 2, 1859 during his sentencing. Corey Feldman. Though I'd argue his current craziness is a direct result of the truth. When Barbara Walters shamed him on TV for speaking up. That dude who suggested that it might be a good idea to wash your hands before performing surgery. Ignace Semmelweis. Harry Marco Polos. Link. Harry Marco Polos, no one believed him when he said Madoff was running a Ponzi scheme. Nikola Tesla. I think about his life too often. Everyone, including me, made fun of Mitt Romney for saying in his 2012 debate with Obama that Russia was the USA's #1 geopolitical foe, but he was absolutely right. Is that where Boltzmann brain comes from? The 80s called. They want their foreign policy back, be Obama. People who said Roe v. Wade was under threat. And here we are now. A petri dish is now considered a child. Corey Feldman. Will never forgive Barbara Walters for the way she behaved when he was talking about the abuse he suffered, which led to the death of his friend. Goddard. Link. In the 1920s, the press, bolstered by some scientists, decided that a rocket in space was completely impossible because there was nothing in space for a rocket to push against. Goddard was ridiculed as an insane crackpot, but he was actually completely right. Sinead O'Connor. The dude who swore for years he could hear people speaking Yiddish in the walls of his apartment in NYC. Turns out people from a nearby synagogue were constructing a secret tunnel under his building. MLK's family blamed the US government for his assassination. People thought they were crazy, but they sued the government for it and won. Glenda Cleveland. She tried to stop Jeffrey Dahmer and instead, the police believed him over her. To this day, I believe that it was because she and Dahmer's victim, Konarak Sinthasampone, were POC and Dahmer was white. Alfred Wegener, who first proposed continental drift, what would ultimately become plate tectonics. Geologists of the day considered him an outsider and rejected his theory. I have a geology book from circa 1960 where the old prevailing theory is well explained, but the field is declared as controversial because there are competing theories, among which is the far-fetched notion of continental drift and plate tectonics. The conclusion is that the jury will likely be out for a long time. Very interesting, how science develops over time. Hello everyone. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to humbly ask you to subscribe to the channel. According to my statistics, 100% of my viewers in the past 28 days are not subscribed. I have always wanted this channel to reach 1,000 subscribers, and if you want to support and be a part of that, subscribe. It's free and it's an awesome way to support the channel. Thanks again, Reddit glitch out.